Think you can put up with me for about an hour here?
I don't think it's, well, you guys put up with us for an hour.
I'll tell you what, I'm impressed. Here on 9:15 on a Friday morning, and people show up to hear us talk about ethics.
I am very impressed. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. That's wonderful. And what we'd like to do is share some things that we face in our office and how it interacts with county government. And Cindy and I are very honored to be here. And just to emphasize who we are, we're in the Inspector General's office for the state. It's a state agency. It was new in 2005. It hadn't been there before. And we do basically two things. I'll start with the second thing because that's what people hear about the most from us. We investigate when state agencies and the state elected officials engage in wrongdoing. And then about the 8.5 years we've been there, we've had over 100 arrests, criminal arrests of state employees and state contractors. Now the first thing we do, which we think is the most important thing, and most people don't write about it in the papers or the media, is the educational and the advisory component of what we do for all the 30,000 state employees. And I more or less head up the investigations and Cindy heads up the more important part, the advisory and the education forums. And you've heard about me. Cindy, have I ever shared with you that I've been a county prosecutor?
Every day. Every day.
Well, so you do know that. So
yes, I do know
You know
that.
I come from county government. When I'm with anyone from county government, I feel at home, even though the last, actually 9 years I've worked for the state in the Inspector General's office. The previous 15 years of that was working out of the courthouse in Brazil in Clay County, Indiana.
And I'll tell you every day, it's back when I was prosecutor, every single day.
It is. I try to teach as I go along, and I think I just bore everyone to death. But I can't help it. I talk about county government because I like it so much. And we're going to tease each other a little bit along the way about things like that. But I started my first 7 years as public defender, so I spent a lot of time in the county jail and up in the courtrooms. And then I ran for prosecutor for 3 terms. It was there in Clay County before I came here as Inspector General. I had the privilege of going and trying cases in 17 counties. So I was mainly in the Wabash Valley area in special prosecutor cases. So I come from county government. I don't know that I'll go back to it, but I still live in Brazil and commute in. I love working in Indianapolis, but I like living in Clay County. I want to say something about Cindy, because she's too modest to say it. Cindy, and this is me, have I ever showed you the Clay County map?
Every day. I'm very familiar where Clay County is.
All right. Cindy hails from Texas, but she and her husband Robert are Hoosiers, and their daughter Sarah. And Cindy came here to graduate from Indiana University Law School. And after law school, we brought her in, and she worked with the state ethics director and immediately moved into that position the last 6 years. She's excellent. She is the chief operating officer of our office. She basically runs our office, which is about 20 people with our commission, and we have the jurisdiction over all 30,000 state employees and then the 30,000 state contractors as well. So she's very modest and will never say that, but she's a very good leader. You're going to hear from her in the future, I'm very confident. Before I leave this, though, is it a coincidence that Texas is smaller than Indiana?
Texas is bigger than Clay County, I'm sure.
Okay, all right. Well, we're glad you're here in Indiana. Why you should listen to us. I think why is the most important thing. Like I say, we're so impressed and thankful you came here on a Friday morning to hear us talk about ethics. A lot of people wouldn't do that. We appreciate your being here. What we do, I think, will interact a lot with what you do in county government. Our hope is to share some specifics that we see from the state level, which we see county governments often interact in. And we're going to talk about more of the violations or the ethics ends of it and how it crosses over between state and county government. So we hope you can take away a few specifics from this. And what we're going to talk about, we want to talk about our state resources and how they connect to the county government and ethics. Secondly, Cindy's going to talk a little bit about her interaction. It's surprising to a lot of people how many county governments approach her and ask, well, how would we do this in our county, and set up an ethics program or an ethics commission. And she's going to tell you a few words about that and update it. I'm going to talk just a moment about the specific criminal offenses that affect all of your county offices, and which may surprise you, some of them that are out there. Then Cindy's going to come back, and although we don't have jurisdiction of this new nepotism rule that applies to county government, we were consulted about it as it moved through the legislation, and even though we don't have anything to do with it, Cindy is going to just share a few thoughts about that. If you're unaware of that, that's something that's going to face you one way or another, the new nepotism rule that applies to county government. And then also I consulted with Tammy White at the State Board of Accounts just to get an idea, well, what's the top risk for county governments these days from the State Board of Accounts perspective, and I'm just going to highlight a few of those. And then after we get through those rules, we're supposed to speak for about 60 minutes. We'd like to illustrate maybe an application of that through a dramatization, and I can't wait to get to that point.
He calls it a dramatization. That's basically him asking me questions and putting me on the hot seat. So I'm just warning you, these are impromptu questions.
I want to think I'm an actor. I have absolutely no experience in it. She actually does. So you're going to see a reversal of those rules. But we try to do that to apply some of the rules, to just approach it a different way.
Before we go on, can I just say, you know,
You're always interrupting me.
Get used to it. No, I'm really, really impressed that you all are here,
Yeah.
and that I'm really thankful to be able to have been here and, you know, participate in this class that the association hosts on several occasions, because I think that it shows the importance of folks, the importance that folks give ethics, and I do see that there is a lot of really good work being done towards moving to having more ethical government, county government and local government and statewide government. And it's really encouraging, especially for, you know, folks like us who deal with this on a daily basis, that the fact that you're here on a Friday morning shows that, you know, you do put importance on such a topic. So thank you for allowing us this time with you, and hopefully we can share some thoughts that might, you know, prompt you to say, maybe I can take something back to my county and implement something that maybe the state is doing. So.
And just to share, to dig down just a little bit deeper about what we actually do in our daily work from the investigative and the education side is basically in three areas. If there's a crime committed in the state by a state employee, that's one. And then second, we have a very specific code of ethics that all state employees must follow. And then third, I don't know if anyone has a military or inspector general background, the third category is what the name inspector general comes from. If we find waste or if we see ways to improve efficiency, we can make written recommendations. But we're going to dwell today mainly on that second component, which is probably the foundation of what we do, ethics. Mm-hmm. And when people talk about ethics, Cindy's part of Colgal. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. She's on the national end. They really like what she's doing ethics-wise, but we hear a lot of people talk about ethics. And when you hear in the news, you hear all the nonprofits and everyone talk about, oh, we need greater transparency in ethics. I'm going to speak for myself here. Sometimes I get a little suspicious when I hear a politician talking about ethics. And we want to give you two examples of what we're talking about. Here's a quote, and I'm going to let you tell the story because you're going to tell it in a better way. But you can read it up there. What politician do you think, are you able to read what's up there? I can read it to you if you want to, but if you can, do you know what politician might have said, we have to seize this moment and enact meaningful ethics reform, and did it in a very public forum? I didn't know this, so you probably don't know, but we just want to share two examples.
Any guesses? Nixon. Good guess. Anyone else? What politician hasn't said something to this effect? Rod
Do you know who that is?
Blagojevich.
Yeah.
Now, the funny story that David is talking about is COGL is the Conference on Government Ethics Laws, and that's kind of an international association of folks like me who, live, eat, and breathe ethics. And so we have an annual conference, and our annual conference happened to be in Chicago a couple years ago. And it was in December 3rd through the 5th or something like that. And since it was so close, David said, well, we can go. And I think that was your first COGO conference? It was your first COGO conference. And so, we had gotten there, and then the next morning it was very early start, and we were at the West End there in downtown Chicago, and everyone was like just glued to the televisions. Yeah. And, it was getting close to whatever time we were supposed to start, and David comes down and he's like, hey, good morning.
I was late.
And everybody was, the sessions were just at a total standstill because they were arresting Rod Blagojevich for all these ethics issues that I'm sure you heard about. But I think the coolest part about that conference was that when we got our materials, we had a binder and welcomes from Mayor Daley and Governor Blagojevich talking about how important ethics was to him and how great it was that Chicago was able to host this international organization on ethics. And there he was being arrested that morning. So needless to say, it made the conference a lot more interesting. Unfortunate for the host, but.
Did he have his auctioneer's gavel in the other hand when he was selling it?
Right? Well, I'll tell you, you mentioned that you had been to one of our legal ethics conference this last year. The year before that, we host a conference.
Yeah, you need to tell them this.
We host a conference on a yearly basis. It's called the Legal and Ethics Conference. If you have an opportunity to go, it's in December every year, or the last week of November. Please, please, please come. You are all absolutely invited. It started off as an idea of, hey, let's get a forum for government entities, government folks, and talk about ethics, talk about things that are important, things that are going on, novel things. So it's grown. Governor Pence has mandated that all state employees who are auditors, investigators, and attorneys attend. We had a great showing, 700 people last year. Or this last December. And we try to get folks from different areas of ethics, auditing, and investigative type issues. The year before, we had the lead prosecutor who prosecuted Rod Blagojevich. He attended our conference and actually played the recordings of the wiretaps that were in his office, and I can't begin to tell you how incredible that was. Those are the types of things we try to do. It's obviously something that was of, had national attention. So I'll take this opportunity to plug the conference, and we definitely welcome all of you next year. So look out for an announcement in closer to December.
We need to tell them who was your keynote this last one.
Oh, this last one, Ken Starr was our keynote. So I don't know how we're going to top that, but we will work hard this year.
If you don't know or don't remember, Ken Starr did the impeachment proceedings, that investigation that led to that. One other example of someone making comments about ethics. I've decided my major role is moral leadership. I cannot exercise this adequately unless I speak out more often and more eloquently.
Any guesses?
Who might have said that? Someone said the name a little bit earlier.
You said Nixon.
Yeah.
There he is.
And that was just a little bit before the Watergate case broke out. What a kiss of death it is on these two examples where the public official, just before things broke open and their scandals began, that they were out speaking in this manner. And we just share that with you that we see that often, that sometimes the people who are most effective, I'll speak again for myself, that are most effective in ethics are the ones who just quietly actually do the ethical things rather than talk about it. But we thought we'd share those two examples with things we've seen. And Cindy helped me compile these three groups. If you ever want to dig down more into ethics, these three groups are, at least from our perspective, groups that do it. I'm most associated with the center one, the Association of Inspectors General. In fact, Cindy hosted their national conference in 2010 in Indianapolis, and they were very impressed with the state. But Colgal there at the bottom, they are definitely, wouldn't you say, they're the main people who deal with government ethics.
Yeah, and I think something that should be pointed out is with these associations, if you are interested in looking for resources, and this is not just for state governments, this could be cities, counties, any type of governmental entity that's interested. The Association of Inspector Generals are, most of the members are city or counties throughout the United States. So my point in kind of illustrating that is, if you're interested in more resources, these organizations are there for tools to give you example codes of ethics or different issues that may come up in different jurisdictions. So it might be worth, a minute or two to Google the Association of Inspectors General or the Conference on Government Ethics Laws. City Ethics is also a really good resource, and I know that Northwest Indiana has been very much in touch with Ed Charbonneau, if any of you are familiar with him, who's now a state senator, was very much involved with city ethics. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. But my point is, these are not just organizations that are useful for state government, it's for county government, city government, any type of government. So.
And these are just the three national groups. We would have to say this with all sincerity, the Association of Indiana Counties is very much involved in this. They ask Cindy or I to come at least once a year and talk about ethics. When legislation is pending, you have advocates with this group who make contact with the legislatures, and from our impression do a wonderful job. In fact, we've worked with them and had great experiences. And then on Cindy's Legal and Ethics Conference, your association here of the Indiana Counties is very supportive of that and even advertises that. So that's a very good Indiana ethics source as well. Just a comment before we jump into it. This is just a personal note on my end. If we don't examine ourselves in government on ethics, someone else will. And this is just my perspective, mainly coming from law enforcement, about things that would happen. And some people may agree or disagree with these comments, but for example, from my impression, because the healthcare industry, whether you want to say it's the insurance companies or the physicians or the hospitals or whatever, because those costs grew out of control and because they didn't do something about it themselves internally, Congress came in and regulated them with that Affordable Care Act. And I'm not saying that's bad or good either way. I'm just saying when you think about your county governments, I think it's really great you're here today because you're doing that. You're taking that step along with the Association of Indiana Counties, trying to regulate yourselves. Think about corporations like at the turn of the 19th and 20th century when the Sherman Antitrust Act came in. Why did that happen? Because of the monopolies. Maybe if the corporations themselves had regulated themselves a little bit more on child labor and the things that were happening, the monopolies, maybe the government wouldn't have come in and regulated them.
Whoa, you're going way back now.
That's true. I'm a community director at a bank, and still out of Clay County. I really enjoy that. I've done that 12 years. I'm telling you from the banking, it's a national bank, from the banking profession, which is the most highly regulated industry there is. Wow, bankers have no one but ourselves to blame for not regulating ourselves because that caused the creation of FDIC and the OCC. What we wouldn't do in the banking world to turn back the clock and maybe look at ourselves a little bit more. Education, whether you think it's a good or a bad thing, the U.S. Department of Education was born. And of course police, which is from my main background, what we as police wouldn't do to turn back the clock prior to 1960s when Miranda came in, maybe we would have interrogated our suspects a little bit differently. Maybe we wouldn't have done the things we did as a police profession to make another regulation come in. And our only point here is we see this in all these different professions. I think it's really great you're here today with an interest on a Friday morning talking about ethics, thinking about your county governments, because if you don't, someone, either a state legislature or Congress, is going to, in the future, regulate you, would be my prediction. Cindy, enough of my philosophy, which may not
Child
amount
labor
to much.
laws, you went a little bit way back there.
Yeah, a little bit overly dramatic. Do I ever get overly dramatic
No,
or tell
never,
stories or
never.
anecdotes?
No, but he's actually very, very right in the fact that, here's this next slide, it's for me to talk about just at least what my experience has been in terms of local jurisdiction ethics. And, again, our jurisdiction is limited to state entities, the executive branch of state government, to be specific. But I can't tell you how many times we are contacted on a regular basis. I would say maybe daily, that's how much, maybe daily, from folks throughout Indiana, whether it's at the county level or at the city level, wanting advice or wanting to know what kinds of remedies there may be for violations they believe are there. What kind of investigations can actually be launched for what they believe a violation of various laws would be. My point is that while, I poked fun about you exaggerating, it's really not an exaggeration. The need is out there, and I'm not saying that, folks are banging down our door, but we definitely have seen a very steady increase in the number of folks who are interested in having some sort of ethics structure for their city, for their county, or for their town, whatever it may be. In fact, just last week, and not only, and I'll say this, it's not only the general public who's interested in having some sort of an ethics structure, it's the media. I can't tell you how many times the media contacts me and says, well, this is the situation that we have. What can be done about it? I just had, a reporter a couple weeks ago tell me that they were very interested. And again, I'll talk about this more when I talk about nepotism, but it seemed to me that they were very excited that there was some sort of nepotism requirements or structure, anything in place, and they wanted more remedies. They wanted more. They wanted more. So they were happy that there was something there with respect to nepotism, but I see the desire from folks in the media to have more. And oftentimes, I think they look to the system that we kind of have in place with the state, not because it may happen to work well. I think it's more because they know about it. You hear about some of the cases that, the special agents have investigated. So there's more notoriety there. And I see a trend definitely from folks within county government, local government, who would want more. So if we don't regulate ourselves now, at some point, you might end up with child labor laws.
Well, I think just before you jump into the other county jurisdictions, we were doing our tallies on people who ask us to investigate county government, even though we have absolutely no jurisdiction. And it's easily over 400 specific allegations of wrongdoing, of criminality or some type of wrongdoing in county governments. And of course, we don't launch into that. But just to let you know, even though right on our website where it says we don't have any jurisdiction, people still pour in their requests for us to investigate.
And I'll say I did a survey of kind of an informal survey, so don't hold me to this if I'm wrong, but I did a survey of different counties in Indiana that have ethics commissions or some sort of structure in place aside from the requirements of this nepotism law that passed in 2012. And I found really three: Marion County, Allen County, and LaPorte County. Now, Marion County just I say recently, I would say maybe 3 or 4 years ago, instituted some sort of an ethics type of structure, very similar to what the state had. We consulted with them, we worked with them. It's almost verbatim the structure that the state had in place, and they put it in place in Marion County. Allen County, from what I understand, actually has an ethics commission in place, and they have a code, and it's a very similar structure. I don't know what the code actually looks like, but I know they have a more, that's probably the most structured commission that I've heard about in Indiana outside of Marion County. Now, what's interesting, I talked about Ed Charbonneau and Northwest Indiana and city ethics. I know that Northwest Indiana, a couple of the cities up there in what, folks call the region, had, experienced a lot of different issues in, past years. I'm sure all of us have heard about situations happening up in Northwest Indiana. And I know that Ed Charbonneau was very much involved in the situation to try to better the confidence that folks had in their governments after a series of different issues that they had. So they worked with city ethics, and they came up with this kind of shared ethics committee, and it is composed of various cities up in Northwest Indiana, Cherville, Maryville, and the county of LaPorte. I know that the county of LaPorte is one of their actual members. So while the structure may be a little bit different from what we have at the state level, from Marion County, from Allen County, there's definitely a push on their part, and I believe a recognition that, hey, there's some issues. Let's make sure that folks have trust in their government. Let's do something about it. So they got together, developed a code of ethics, and they have, a structure. They have trainings. They have different options and tools for folks who want to make sure that they abide by this code of ethics that they've adopted. So I see a push, at least in Northwest Indiana, a couple of different counties, and yeah, and that's.
We might share, isn't Jim Clevenger the county attorney in
Yes.
Plymouth? You might share who he is to us and what perspective he brings when we, on all of our decisions.
Yeah, our Ethics Commission chair is from Marshall County. He is the county attorney, Jim Clevenger, and he really, I think, is an excellent chair because he brings the perspective from county government. He really makes sure that he understands. I think he has a perspective of understanding how things work from not just the state agency level, but also at the county level. And I think that really adds to our commission. But yeah, Jim Clevenger is from Marshall County.
We're going to get a little bit more specific just on our state resources, on ethics on the state end of it. I want to say something about the Uniform Government Code and then the codification. First of all, the Uniform Government Code, that's just something, an online service. If you're curious about state ethics, and there is a lot of overlap, especially with purchasing, that might be a resource to you. Let me give you a sample of that. There's, in red, is the web link. And off to the left, where you can see the intro, the criminal ethics, financial contracts, especially in county government. If you click on the financial and contracts, a lot of overlap there. In what you do or the requirements that you're required to do when you buy things or enter into contracts. That's just an online resource on our website. I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's been a recodification, and this really affects you. I'm going to dig down really specifically here on some crimes that affect county government. This is, first of all, AIC 3544.1. That's the things we typically hear about more generally, like official misconduct, bribery, ghost employment, conflict of interest. We were asked by the legislature, and we helped them recodify and list all of the crimes that apply to government officials. So if you're ever wondering, well, what crimes really apply to my county commissioners or my county office, they're all listed under that. And you can just read you don't have to read all the statutes, you can just read those titles and get there. And then I'm going to flip to the second, I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Here's the second page, and I'm going to start with this. This is just the next following article, and I would take I'd scan this one too, because this is again a recodification pulling all of the crimes out of Titles 4 and 5 and listing them for the first time together. This is just done about a year ago because they were buried all throughout 4 and 5. And let me just take you down a road on a couple of these. Probably people know what the depository rule is. That if you don't deposit receipts into your county government as well as state government within 24 hours, that it's a felony and you can be arrested for that. So if someone comes and pays a fee at the county clerk's office or any of your county governments, if you don't have deposits those receipts deposited in a treasurer-approved bank account within 24 hours, the law forever has been, it used to be a Class B felony, I stress B, 6 to 20 years. And no prosecutors were enforcing that. That was too harsh. We recommended that. It was way too harsh, but it's still a D felony. And that's something sometimes people kind of shake their heads. I didn't even know that. But it sounds like a harsh rule, but say someone comes in on a Friday and pays a fee, and you all go home for the weekend, and then Monday you make the deposit, more likely it'll be the State Board of Accounts who will write that up. But just be aware, if you had, surely they don't exist, but if you had a renegade county prosecutor who said, you know what, that's a D felony, and I don't like them in the clerk's office or whatever. Surely those prosecutors aren't out there. But you don't want to be that test case in Indiana, and that's been on the books forever. So that depository rule, that's number one. You might just be aware of that in your county government office because it applies to you as a public servant. Here's the ones that get even a little more obscure, and the whole reason we codified and listed them. The cash book rule. Now, you usually hear about that in a State Board of Accounts audit. In other words, you must keep a cash book, and the statute is very specific on what that cash book must be. But it's basically your receipt book. When you receipt money in, and the State Board of Accounts comes, and they'll say, well, show me your cash book, and they'll look through that. That is a crime if you don't do that. Now, I can't find an appellate decision where someone was charged and it went up on appeal, but you don't want to be that first person. And these are more illuminated now that they're codified. So that's another, I'm talking about a crime. Theoretically, you could be arrested for that. A third one, and this is the most obscure to me, and this has been on the books since it's scary that I know this, since the 1947 Reorganization Act, which is in Title IV, the itemization rule, that if invoices are processed through public service, which is county government as well as state, and those invoices are not itemized, in other words, orders or invoices that come to you for payment, and they're not itemized, that's a crime. Now, usually the State Board of Accounts just writes it up, but we've made ourselves available to the Indiana Prosecuting Attorneys Council and to the legislature saying, well, all we've done in this recodification is illuminated these existing rules. We didn't change any of them other than lowering the depository rule. That is something that I would think you as county government, as well as we in state government, want to really examine. Do we really want these to be crimes? Or maybe we do, but that was something that I think was most people are not aware of. And those are listed right there under AIC 3544.2. Now, go ahead, jump in, please.
You all might be very familiar with these rules, and I'm sure you are. I just think that as we were going through the process of developing the list, I distinctly remember during one of the legislative committee hearings, there were legislators who were flipping through 9 pages of information of one statutory section. And then way at the bottom of page 10, there was this provision that said, and by the way, anything that was just mentioned in the 9 previous pages could be a class, B felony or something to that effect. And so, unless, again, I certainly don't sit and read the Indiana Code. I know that you guys are definitely, you guys are more familiar. They make fun of me because I watch the legislative hearings on time.
She does.
But I'm
glad you do.
I just wouldn't know. I wouldn't know if I didn't sit there and thought anything in those previous 9 pages could be a crime. So I'm just suggesting if you have a minute or two, it might be worthwhile to just scan this. And I'd be surprised if you didn't think, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that was actually not only a requirement, but what might surprise you is that it was a requirement, and if you failed to do it, it would be a crime, or you did it, it would be a crime. That was the surprising thing to me. So,
and the reason we took this to the legislature to make them specify, do you really mean this, is here we're the State Inspector General's office, so on the state level, if these things are happening, if people are not itemizing their invoices, if they're not depositing on time, I have the duty under the statute to root out all wrongdoing in state government. So it really made the legislature uncomfortable for me to say to them, look, these laws are on the books. If you don't mean them, get them off the books. And I think it was my county background that made me think about that, thinking, do you really want the county prosecutors doing this? Because they're not. I don't think you're going to find any cash book or itemization rule books, but definitely in the depository rule. In other words, what usually happens is a thief in your government office will usually take the money and just set it aside to see if anyone misses it for a while. And then if somebody says, hey, the books aren't reconciling, what's happening? Is, oh, well, here they are, just to see if they get away with it. That's what the depository rule is meant to penalize, because they don't actually steal it for the theft offense, but they didn't deposit it within the 24 hours. In other words, it's that one step closer to theft. So the depository rule is probably the one where your county prosecutor is more likely to come after your office, especially if the State Board of Accounts takes it to them. Let me go to the more general ones. I just want to talk about two. This is going back to the ghost employment and the conflict of interest statute. I'm going to come back with an example about ghost employment. And people hear about that a lot, but that's definitely a criminal offense. I want to spend just a minute though, on the criminal conflict of interest. And in our dramatization, I'm going to give an example of what would be a criminal conflict of interest, but it's basically this simple. If you, in the county government as well as state, if you, that public servant, contract back with your own entity, and it's something beyond what your duties are, that's a crime, and it's a felony. For example, and you'll hear this repeated, say I'm a county commissioner, and my business outside of being a county commissioner is running a concrete plant. And on a construction project, I want to sell gravel to the county project. And I'm a county commissioner. Can't do that. And it happens. Things like that happen. People contract back with their own entity. And you really got to watch that conflict of interest, that criminal conflict of interest, because once a prosecutor understands what's happening there, that makes a lot of people liable. And I see that out there. I don't have jurisdiction to do anything about it, and I'm not trying to cause trouble. I'm just saying people who on a Friday morning care enough to come to a meeting like this, that would be a really nice takeaway to think through your own government office when somebody says, well, I have this business on the side. Can I contract back with this? I'll do it better than anyone, and I'll do it at a cheaper price. You really need to look at that rule. We'll give a specific example later. Go ahead.
What's interesting is David wrote a report recommending to the legislature to clarify that particular conflict of interest law. I don't know if you remember a couple years ago, they made a change to the law. Now, it wasn't any substantive changes, but it was just very difficult to understand the way that it was written. And so it was more of an organizational change. Now you have the actual prohibition and then the exceptions, but nothing really substantively changed. What I can share is definitely during some of the committee hearings, some of the legislators who are obviously from county government or very familiar with county government or have friends who are involved in county government, were very concerned about the effect of the law. Now, keep in mind, we weren't saying that the substance should change. They were just surprised themselves to recognize that somebody might actually have a conflict of interest after they started, really reading it and understanding what it meant. Because sometimes, understandably so, in county government, someone who might be involved in county government might also own the only business that can provide that specific service to the county. So it's a situation that is very real, exists, and all we're saying is take a look at that rule and make sure that you understand the ins and outs so that you don't get surprised if you're in a situation where you could potentially have a conflict of interest.
Wouldn't you say the summary is if you contract back with your own government entity, you
Correct.
watch that?
Correct.
Okay. The other one, just wanted to put this up here, and not picking on anyone in general, but here's just a recent case. I know you can't read it, but I just wanted to display the plea agreement of up north, a county surveyor under federal indictment, under ghost employment. And I haven't talked about ghost employment yet because they were doing political activity out of that office and with their employees, and that's a county official. So beware that not only do you have the state police or your county prosecutor who might have that review, there's that federal review as well, that if you're signing your county employees and state employees as well to anything that's not your official business, you're going to have this review by the federal authorities. And here's somebody, for all I know, was an excellent government official and just didn't think through, on my reelection, maybe I shouldn't have done this here in the office. So just beware that ghost employment really frowns upon and makes criminal both on the state and the federal end if you're doing things that are not official government business within your office, whether it's county or state or federal. If you want to know more about that, let me know. I can give you some specifics about that. Okay, specific. I'll let you give the disclaimer on what our office has to do with local nepotism, because it's important that you understand that. But we thought, well, in this type of setting, we saw this unfold, and we thought we'd just share a few tips with you about nepotism in county government.
How many of you, by show of hands, are familiar with the nepotism law? Definitely. Okay, good. So everyone, good. I imagine that you may have definitely been very much aware of everything that happened during the legislative session. It was in 2012. And again, kind of going back to my original comment of, I see a push definitely for something to be in place regarding ethics at the county level. Now, to talk about what our involvement with this particular provision of nepotism is, I have to stress that we don't have really anything, any involvement in terms of enforcement or interpretation of this particular provision. But again, I would say on a daily, weekly basis, we get calls from folks who, I think in a very positive way, want to understand how this rule works, what the provisions mean, especially folks, I've gotten calls from folks in HR departments who very much are very interested in, whether this promotion is going to violate the new nepotism law or not. So I definitely see, I would say maybe 98% of the calls that we get are from people who want to know whether or not something is going to be a violation of this particular law. I see that as a very good thing. In our particular office, we have an advisory component to what we do. And so I think that's, David was saying that the robust part of our office is the education piece, advising folks on how to actually abide by the code of ethics that we've established is a very big part of our office, and people take advantage of it. And I can definitely see that folks at the local levels of government definitely want to understand and want to do the right thing. So I think that's why they reach out to our office. The unfortunate thing for me is that I have to tell them that we don't really have any involvement with this. But having said that, I know that you all are very familiar with this nepotism law. I'm sure is of great interest for you, but I do want to touch on just a couple of different highlights of the law. It basically prohibits hiring relatives, to put it very simply. What's interesting about this is that at the same time that this nepotism bill was being shepherded through the legislature, we also made a recommendation that the nepotism law that applies to the executive branch of state government also be revamped. We stole a little piece of what your nepotism law is and actually inserted it in ours because we thought it was so good. The direct line of supervision. So not only can you not hire relatives, you cannot hire relatives who are in your direct line of supervision. The state, in contrast, had a law in place that had not been changed, a nepotism law that had not been changed since 1980. And that law said that you could not have a person in a supervisor or relatives in supervisory subordinate relationships. So as you can understand or you can imagine, what typically would happen at the state level is you would have a supervisor have one person in between their family members so that they would not violate that nepotism law. Well, it made that middle person very uncomfortable. So when we saw that your nepotism law was going through and saw the direct line of supervision language, we thought that's really great language. Let's go ahead and incorporate that. So we copied some from your law. Nonetheless, you can't have direct line of relatives in your direct line of supervision. And as you can imagine, I say this only to encourage you, if you have the opportunity to go back and talk to your county folks, to your county governments, I'm telling you that there's folks who have questions about this. What does direct line of supervision mean? They contact us all the time. And, you know, maybe it merits a discussion with folks. It merits a discussion amongst yourselves as, you know, county commissioners or your county commission to talk about that. And let's clarify it and let's be standard on what that answer is. Folks have questioned, well, if I promote this person and they become part of the direct line of supervision, is that going to violate the law? Things like that. Fortunately, I had a grandfather clause, so that also is fortunate for the folks who are in place, but also generates even more questions. You know, as people change, who were maybe 10, 20, 30-year county employees and they start to be promoted, how is this new law affected? My point, I keep repeating the same thing. Questions are generated. It might definitely merit a conversation to say, hey, you know, let's talk about how we're going to actually clarify these different provisions that came in. In terms of the actual requirements, it required that each county adopt or unit of government adopt a policy that would have established the provisions in that nepotism statute at least as stringent as that. Now, every county could actually go beyond that and implement more stringent requirements if they chose. Do you all know whether or not your county has adopted your that policy by show of hands? My guess
Looks
is
unanimous. That's good.
My guess is you would, because the statute provides that if you failed to adopt a policy, the State Board of Accounts would basically include a provision in their audit report, and the Department of Local Government Finance could withhold any monies from your county. So
Repeat that, because that's the enforcement end, right?
that's key. Absolutely, absolutely. I had a conversation. I mentioned Jim Clevenger. You know, it's from Marshall County. He said, "Oh, I was on the ball with that one." We definitely had the nepotism policy drafted as quick as we possibly could. So the State Board of Accounts in their audit every year has to make sure that there is a certification that the policy has been adopted by the county, because failure to have that finding from the State Board of Accounts, or that certification as the State Board of Accounts, can result in the Department of Local Government Finance withholding money. So again, I'm happy that it was unanimous that everybody's adopted it. I suspect that it was. What's interesting is I went through and I thought, okay, well, here we are almost 2 years after the law has been in effect. It took effect July 1st, 2012. And I looked to see if there were any cases that had been litigated, about this particular provision, and I found one. And of all the cases, it was Madison County. It's not necessarily on point. It mentions the nepotism law, but I thought that the nepotism law definitely has had an effect. That particular case, I can give you the citation afterwards if you're interested, but it involved the United Auto Workers and the Madison County Recorder's Office and Assessor's Office. There were changes that had come into play after the election of the recorder and the assessor. This case just was reported in December, so just a few months ago. You might be familiar or have heard about it. And so the basic gist of the case was that the county had entered into a collective bargaining agreement with UAW, and they were wanting to enforce that collective bargaining agreement when the assessor and the recorder wanted to make their staffing changes after their elections for whatever reasons. And they wanted to say that the county was the employer and not the individual elected officials. So UAW cited this nepotism law and said, well, the county is required, any elected official's employee is required to abide by this nepotism law. And the trial court and the Court of Appeals actually disagreed and said that there's a specific provision in this nepotism statute that requires any elected official to certify to the executive of that local or of that unit of government that they have been abiding by the provisions of that nepotism law. So they said the fact that the statute recognizes that a recorder or an assessor is a separate elected official and has to report to somebody different that they are abiding by the nepotism law suggests that they're not all one unit and therefore subject to the collective bargaining agreement. Probably more than what you wanted to know, but I thought it was interesting that there was actually a case that noted this particular statute. So.
A lot of people think it was kind of, I grew up in the 70s, kind of cool that John F. Kennedy had his brother as his attorney general, you know. But it's a different time. Be careful if you were going to hire relatives. Our advice would be not to do it, or at least be aware of that rule. You're in the home stretch, folks. We're about done. You've been very patiently listening to us. I'm going to fly through these because you could probably educate me on these. But here's what the State Board of Accounts say your most vulnerable risk is in county governments. Your purchasing, your public works projects, your property tax abatements, and your public records requests and meetings. So if you're wondering, well, say I want to spend time, I mean, that's where I would focus. And then I would add above number one, those criminal cases I pointed out to you. But that's just a view from the State Board of Accounts. They're good partners with us. They've helped us out.
So your next speaker, the public access counselor, is going to be great.
And let me do this because you're not going to brag about yourself. This is just a chart from one of our annual reports on our open records requests. I'll tell you what, the most important thing is get that letter to the requester within 24 hours. And then you can do your response later. But we measure in a metric our response. And I know it's kind of difficult to see, but Cindy's in charge of that since she runs the office. Our response time is the lighter red. See how that's gone down each year? And mainly our requests to us are from media. And although the media will still write some bad things about us, it's really amazing, I think, that the media has appreciated our quick responses to them. So if you're of the attitude, I'll get my 24-hour letter out to them and then I'll respond to them the next year, good luck with that. We look at that very carefully. She's in charge of it and can speak more intelligently about it.
Can I share just some practical kind of advice that over the years that I've seen? I know Luke is going to give you a lot more of the law, and he's the expert. So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to share kind of my experience with it. And I mean, I'm sure that you guys have gotten public records requests. I'm absolutely certain of it.
Yeah.
And, you know, one big thing that I've learned throughout the years about public records requests is that a lot, at least I'll say for us, it's oftentimes the media. And just really sometimes really understanding what it is that they're looking for and trying to have a conversation with someone is very effective. And sometimes they might approach you and request a specific document that maybe doesn't even exist. And if you just deny the document and it just starts kind of going down this bad path. And, you know, as much as you can, I don't know if there's folks who are, you know, just members of the general public who are very interested in how their government works. I think that if they don't know how your office works, they don't know what records you have, they don't know what records you generate, sometimes they are contacting you with their best guess of what a record might be. my point is having a conversation, an open conversation. Luke, I'm sorry you might disagree, but having an open conversation with them to see what it is they need can oftentimes really help a situation when you're trying to address a public records request. And if you flat out say, I understand what you're looking for, we don't happen to have that document, or I think what you're looking for is this, it goes a long way. And that's just kind of a practical tip that I wish I would have known a long time ago, so. Oh, good, good.
And there's your expert back there, but this chart is our history for the last 5 years. The darker red are the requests that come into our office per year. So it's gone from like 15 all the way up to 55. That's the future of public records requests from our perspective. And then look what Cindy's done on the response time. She's gone the opposite way. She's reduced the time in responding, and that's the final response to them. And it's helped us tremendously, and just something to think about. Okay.
10 minutes. We've got 10 more minutes.
Can we do our little skit now?
He really wants to do this skit.
And we're only going to do like the first one, okay?
Okay.
So it's only going to be at most 3 minutes.
Okay, that's great.
You probably don't know Cindy, but I was county prosecutor.
Clay, there you go.
Oh, yes. Did I mention?
Apparently everyone in the room knows that.
We are building a new jail in Clay County. Did you know that?
Now I do.
They're gonna name it after me.
Right.
That actually is a picture of our jail we just built there. I want to ask you just one question about it. I haven't told you this until just now, but one of the commissioners died about a month ago, and the precinct committeemen got together, and they went ahead and just appointed me to fill out that commissioner's position. I assume that's not a problem working in the state and being a county commissioner, is it?
Oh, my goodness. Well, aside from the dual office holding problem that you might have, which I'm not sure, that's the Attorney
Well,
General's
I would
office.
say,
The
that's
Attorney
not
General's
you.
office.
That's the Attorney General, right?
That's the Attorney
Okay,
General's
forget that
office.
then.
You've got all kinds of problems, moonlighting. You've got on the screen right now conflicts of interest that could potentially come up. I can't even begin.
Well, that's the state code though, right?
Yes, this is
That's
the
not
state
the
code.
county code.
Correct.
Well, I just want to ask you about one scenario, because another thing I haven't shared with you in the past, I do have an interest in a concrete company. And it's in Clay County. Did I mention I'm from Clay County? And in the construction of that, building, I can sell gravel to the contractors much cheaper than anyone else can.
You
So-
just finished telling them about conflicts of interest. I hope you're designing this specifically to highlight the conflict of interest.
Well, as a
rule.
county commissioner, I can sell gravel towards the county jail project, can't I?
You'd have a conflict of interest problem.
Well, the worst would happen is like some State Board of Accounts audit or something would happen, right? Or what's my
No.
penalty if I go ahead and contract with my own entity?
It's a crime. I think everyone here in the room could actually re-emphasize that this would potentially be a crime. I think that's pretty clear.
Oh, that's...
Wait, you got to show them that.
That's my brochure.
That's your brochure.
I took a recent photograph of myself.
I have to share with
And-
you, we did this presentation and I hadn't seen the actual picture. I had to stop for maybe 5 minutes and just I could not stop
But
laughing.
that was if we had more time for me to express my dramatic career, I was going to tell you also about my consulting business back with the county as a commissioner. So surely I can enter a contract back with the county to consult for them, because if you don't know, I was the state inspector general. I have all this knowledge. And Clay County will really benefit. Even though I'm the county commissioner, we can provide consulting services for the building of that jail much cheaper than anyone else.
I would say that you really have to evaluate your considerations and decide what you're going to do, either county commissioner or contract back, because you could definitely get into a couple of jams there.
And only because they're tired of hearing me. This would be my state problem.
Correct.
With the, and I could be barred from state government forever.
Correct.
And then also, here's my Here's where I'd be
problem.
arrested, is that right?
Correct. That's interesting to note that for state employees, we're kind of subject to two different sets of rules. You've got the crimes and you've got the ethics code. I don't think we talk too much about the fact that we do have an ethics code that applies to all state employees. It's in our administrative rules. We spend a lot of time educating folks about those rules, advising them on the application of those rules. But it's interesting that when folks contact us, sometimes they're now starting to focus on, is it a violation of the ethics code that we have in place for state employees? And sometimes I tell them, the ethics code's the least of your problems. I think you need to worry about a crime. So it's interesting to see that at least for folks in state government, that we've got these two parallel universes that we've got to worry about. If you're an attorney in state government, you've got a third code of professional conduct that you have to worry about. So, to conclude the dramatization.
One more question
Oh,
before
my
you conclude.
goodness. Yes.
Would some of your attorneys do their legal research for me on the bidding process for these subcontractors for the building of that jail?
No, it's ghost employment. Again, the ghost employment for the state, the ghost employment as a crime, the ghost employment as a crime for you for assigning that to state employees. It's these codes of ethics that are in place. And, sometimes people say, well, really, we've got 3 codes to abide by if you're an attorney. We've got the code of professional responsibility. We've got the state's code, and then we've got the law. And, it's one of those situations where you have to navigate through those 3 different codes, and we hope that our education efforts is going to help folks navigate through those situations that could, very easily, like you said, assigning someone to do research on Westlaw could implicate a criminal problem with a criminal ghost employment, a state code of ethics problem with the ghost employment rule, and then potentially something if you're an attorney with a professional code of conduct. So,
we can't stress enough how your association here, the Indiana Association of Counties, are very much in tune with these laws. And they're actually sharing that with us when it appears in the legislature. So you have a great organization here. And we really appreciate your inviting us each year. And we feel from our end it's a great partnership. And we just wanted to make sure and stress that whatever it's worth, I think it's a great organization you have together. And the fact that you're regulating yourselves and looking at all these issues is just really outstanding. Most government entities in other states just do not do that. So I think you really stand out, and you should be very much applauded for doing that.
thank you for putting up with us for an hour. I hope we didn't come and, bring the doom and gloom, but there's definitely always help in the horizon. The Association of Indiana Counties is, I know, a very good resource for you. Our office is always open and available to you. I definitely do invite you to take part in our legal ethics conference. It's not just for state employees. It's for really for anyone who's interested in ethics. And, if not for anything else, it's a good time. So.
Thanks for having us.